Moravia High School was showcasing its new stadium with a packed crowd against Groton, and opening the drive, the Blue Devils would fail to score after pressure from the Redhawks. Groton on 4th and short would not be able to convert, putting Moravia over the 5th-yard line. Blue Devils looked to convert with a deep pass from senior Jaden Mitchell with the interception. Moravia would have another chance right outside of the red zone on 4th down, but not finding a score. The Blue Devils would roll later in the game, the home opener, 43-6.